Hello, Heartland fans. The crisp morning air settled over Heartland Ranch as Amy Fleming went about her usual routine, tending to the horses with the same dedication she had always shown. The early sunlight cast a golden glow over the familiar landscape, a sight that had become both comforting and a reminder of all that had changed. For years, she had built a life without Ty Borden, raising their daughter Lindy and finding strength in the support of her family. But nothing could have prepared her for what was about to unfold. A sudden commotion near the barn caught Amy's attention. Jack Bartlett, her grandfather, stood frozen in place, his expression one of disbelief. Lou, her sister, had a hand pressed against her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. As Amy followed their gaze, her breath caught in her throat. Standing at the entrance of Heartland, as if stepping out of a long-forgotten memory, was Ty Borden, the man she had loved, the man she had lost. Time seemed to stand still as Amy took in his appearance. He looked almost the same, yet there was something different about him, an air of uncertainty, of hesitation. His eyes, once so full of life and dreams, now held the weight of years spent away. He had returned, but why? And more importantly, what did this mean for her and Lindy? Amy's hands trembled as she took an involuntary step forward. Ty's gaze locked onto hers, and in that moment, a flood of emotions surged through her. Relief, anger, confusion, and an overwhelming ache of everything they had lost. The world around them faded, leaving only the two of them suspended in the gravity of the moment. Ty? Amy's voice was barely above a whisper, her heart pounding against her chest. He nodded slowly, as if afraid that speaking would shatter the fragile reality between them. Amy, I had to come back. The weight of his words settled heavily between them. Amy swallowed hard, trying to find her voice. After all these years, just like that? Ty took a hesitant step closer, but Amy instinctively took a step back. The pain of his absence, the years she had spent grieving and learning to move forward, all came crashing back. I know I have no right to just show up, he admitted, his voice thick with emotion. But there's so much I need to say, so much I need to explain. Amy turned away, hugging herself as if shielding her heart from the storm of emotions raging within. Just then, a small voice interrupted the tense moment. Mommy? Lindy stood nearby, clutching her stuffed horse tightly. Her bright blue eyes, so much like Ty's, flickered with curiosity and something else, an instinctive connection she couldn't quite understand. She had only ever known her father through stories, pictures, and the love her mother carried in her heart. And now, he stood before her, a stranger, and yet someone undeniably significant. Ty's gaze softened as he took in the sight of his daughter, the little girl he had never had the chance to watch grow up. Emotion choked him as he slowly crouched down, meeting Lindy's wide-eyed stare. Lindy, he whispered, his voice barely holding together. The little girl hesitated, looking up at her mother for reassurance. Amy's heart clenched. She had always told Lindy about her father, but she had never prepared her for the possibility of meeting him. Lindy's small voice broke the silence. Are you my daddy? Tears welled up in Ty's eyes as he nodded. Yes, sweetheart, I am. Silence stretched between them as Lindy processed the revelation. Amy held her breath, unsure of how her daughter would react. Would she embrace him, or would the years of absence create a wall between them? Then, in a moment that took everyone by surprise, Lindy took a tentative step forward. She didn't throw herself into his arms, nor did she shy away. Instead, she simply studied him, as if trying to piece together the image of the father she had always imagined with the man standing before her. Ty remained perfectly still, letting her take the lead. I know I've been gone a long time, he said softly, and I know that's not fair to you or your mom, but if you'll let me, I'd like to be here now. Lindy tilted her head, considering his words with the wisdom only a child could possess. You made Mommy sad, she finally said, her voice holding a quiet strength. Ty's shoulders sagged, the truth of her words cutting deep. I know, he admitted, and I'm so sorry for that. Amy watched the exchange, her heart torn between wanting to protect Lindy from potential hurt and the undeniable fact that this was a moment her daughter deserved. Lindy had a right to know her father, to decide for herself how she felt about him. Jack, who had remained silent, finally stepped forward, his gaze stern yet not unkind. "You got a lot of explaining to do, son," he said gruffly. "You don't just walk back into this family like nothing happened." Ty nodded, accepting the challenge. "I know, Jack, and I'm ready to face it." Amy exhaled, feeling the weight of uncertainty settle over her. This was only the beginning. Ty's return had opened a door she wasn't sure she was ready to walk through, but one thing was clear: nothing at Heartland would ever be the same again. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows over the ranch, Amy realized that the road ahead would be filled with questions, heartache, and choices she never thought she would have to make again. But one thing was certain: this was a story far from over. And so, with the past colliding with the present, the next chapter of Heartland began. The weight of Ty's return lingered heavily over Heartland, stirring emotions that had long been buried. Amy had spent years convincing herself that she had moved on, that she had found her own strength without him. And yet, standing face to face with the man she had once built her life around, she felt as if she were caught between the past and the present. As the hours passed, the initial shock of his return gave way to an overwhelming tension. Jack, Lou, and the rest of the family gathered inside the house, their eyes darting between Amy and Ty, each silently weighing what his return truly meant. Lou was the first to break the silence. "So, where have you been all this time?" Her voice was steady, but there was an unmistakable edge to it. Ty exhaled heavily, his fingers laced together as he sat on the edge of the couch. "It's a long story, Lou," he admitted, his gaze drifting toward Amy. "One that I owe to all of you." Amy folded her arms, keeping her distance. "Then start talking." Ty hesitated, his throat tightening. He had rehearsed this moment countless times in his mind, but now that he was here, no words felt right. He finally looked up at her, his expression filled with remorse. "After everything that happened, I was lost. I needed to find a way to deal with my demons, and I thought the only way to do that was to go far away." Amy shook her head, frustration flickering in her eyes. "So you just left?" "I didn't know how to come back," Ty admitted. "I was ashamed, Amy. I thought I was protecting you, protecting Lindy from a version of me that wasn't whole. But I see now that all I did was create more pain." Amy's jaw clenched. "You don't get to decide what's best for us, Ty. You don't get to just walk away and come back when it suits you." Jack, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke up. "You should have reached out, son." His voice was gruff, but there was a layer of understanding beneath it. Amy and Lindy deserved better than silence. Ty nodded solemnly. "I know, and I want to make it right, if I still can." Before Amy could respond, footsteps padded across the wooden floor. Lindy stood at the doorway, her small frame silhouetted against the light. She clutched a drawing in her hands, hesitating before stepping forward. "I made this," she said softly, holding it out to Ty. Ty took the paper carefully, his throat tightening at the sight. It was a simple drawing, a picture of a family, a woman with golden hair, a little girl, and a man with eyes that looked just like his own. His heart ached at what it meant. "You've been in my drawings," Lindy said, tilting her head, "but never here." Amy's breath caught in her throat at her daughter's words. The honesty of a child had a way of cutting through all the complexities that adults tangled themselves in. Ty swallowed hard, his voice thick. "I know, sweetheart. And I'm so sorry." Lindy studied him for a moment, then glanced at her mother. "Are you staying?" Ty looked to Amy, the answer not entirely in his control. Amy felt every eye in the room on her, waiting for a response she wasn't sure she had. "I don't know," she finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what's supposed to happen next." Lou placed a gentle hand on Amy's arm. "Maybe that's okay," she murmured. "Maybe you don't have to know right now." Amy's shoulders sagged slightly. The wounds Ty had left behind weren't going to heal overnight, but one thing was clear. His return had shaken the very foundation of the life she had rebuilt. The road ahead was uncertain, and for the first time in years, She wasn't sure where it would lead. Outside, the horses neighed softly in the distance, the golden hues of the setting sun casting long shadows across Heartland. Change was in the air, and whether she was ready for it or not, Amy knew one thing for certain: nothing would ever be the same again. The following morning, the crisp Alberta air carried an eerie silence across Heartland. The golden sun barely peeked over the horizon as Amy saddled up Spartan, hoping a morning ride would clear her thoughts. She had barely slept, her mind plagued by memories and unanswered questions. Ty was back. But what did that mean? Could she trust him? Did she even want to? As she guided Spartan toward the open field, she heard footsteps crunching on the frosted grass. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Amy? Ty's voice was hesitant, careful. Amy tightened her grip on the reins. I need some time, Ty. I get that, he replied, taking a slow step closer. But I don't want to leave things unsaid. Amy sighed, finally turning to face him. You don't get to just show up and expect everything to go back to normal. Ty exhaled sharply. I don't expect that. I know I have a long way to go, but I want to be here. For you. For Lindy. The mention of Lindy made Amy's chest tighten. You don't even know her. I want to, Ty said softly, but I can't do that unless you let me. Amy looked at him, searching his face for any sign of insincerity. But all she saw was the man she had once loved, the man she had built a life with, the man who had shattered that life when he left. And yet, despite everything, part of her wanted to believe him. Before she could say anything, a truck pulled up in the distance. The sound of gravel crunching under tires pulled them both out of the moment. It was Caleb. Amy felt a strange sense of relief. Caleb had been there for her when Ty was gone, helping with the ranch, supporting Lindy, and, more than anything, being a friend when she needed one the most. Caleb stepped out of the truck, his expression unreadable as he took in the scene before him. His eyes lingered on Ty for a moment before shifting to Amy. Everything okay? Amy forced a smile. Yeah, just trying to figure things out. Caleb gave a small nod, then turned to Ty. Didn't think I'd see you back here. Didn't think I'd be back, Ty admitted. Caleb studied him for a moment, then smirked. Guess we've got a lot to catch up on. Ty nodded, but Amy could sense the tension between them. Caleb had been a part of her life during Ty's absence, and whether Ty liked it or not, that wasn't going to change. I should get back to the barn, Amy said, feeling the weight of the conversation pressing down on her. I'll see you later, Ty asked carefully. Amy hesitated, then gave a small nod before riding off toward the barn, leaving Ty and Caleb standing in the open field. Caleb shoved his hands into his pockets. You know, she's been through hell because of you. I know, Ty said quietly. I just want to make things right. Caleb let out a short laugh. That's going to take a lot more than just showing up, man. Ty met his gaze, determination flickering in his eyes. I'm not going anywhere. Caleb studied him for a moment, then shook his head. Guess we'll see about that. As Caleb walked toward the barn, Ty turned back toward the house, his mind swirling with thoughts. He knew winning back Amy's trust wouldn't be easy, but he had made one decision he was certain of. He wasn't giving up. The tension at Heartland hadn't faded, and neither had the uncertainty. The next morning, Amy found herself pacing the kitchen, a cup of coffee going cold in her hands. Lou sat at the table watching her sister with concern. You need to talk to him, Amy. Amy shook her head. I did. And it doesn't change anything. Ty being here, it just brings everything back. The pain. The confusion. Lou sighed, setting down her own mug. And the love? Amy froze, her grip tightening on the ceramic handle. That's not fair. I'm just saying you need to be honest with yourself about what you're feeling. Before Amy could respond, the sound of small feet running down the stairs filled the air. Lindy appeared in the doorway, her bright eyes filled with something between excitement and nervousness. Mom, he's outside. Amy's heart dropped. She didn't need to ask who. Lou gave her a knowing look. Go. With a deep breath, Amy set her cup down and walked to the door. As soon as she stepped outside, she saw Ty standing near the barn, talking to Jack. The older man's arms were crossed, his expression unreadable. Amy took a few hesitant steps forward just as Jack turned and walked away, leaving Ty alone. "You're up early?" she said cautiously. Ty turned, a small uncertain smile on his lips. "Figured I'd try to be useful." Amy folded her arms. "And Jack just let you?" Ty chuckled. "Not exactly, but I think he knows I'm not going anywhere." Silence hung between them before Ty spoke again. "I need to show you something." Amy hesitated, but curiosity got the best of her. "Okay." Ty led her toward the truck he had arrived in. As he opened the passenger door, Amy saw a small wooden box on the seat. He picked it up, handing it to her. "What is this?" "Open it." Amy lifted the lid and inhaled sharply. Inside were old letters. Some she had written to him, others he had written but never sent. There were also photographs, some from their early days together, and one very recent one, of Lindy, taken from afar. Amy's eyes stung as she looked up at him. "You kept these." Ty nodded. "I never stopped thinking about you, about our family." Amy swallowed hard, emotions threatening to overwhelm her. "Then why did you stay away?" Ty's face darkened. "Because I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought you'd be better off without me." Amy shook her head, closing the box. "You don't get to decide that for me, or for Lindy." Ty stepped closer, his voice softer. "I know, and I'm here now. If you'll let me be." Amy looked down at the box in her hands. The weight of the past and the uncertainty of the future pressed down on her. "I don't know, Ty." "That's okay," he said gently. "Just don't shut me out." Amy met his gaze, and for the first time since he had returned, she felt something shift. Hope? Uncertainty? Maybe both. But one thing was clear. This wasn't over yet. The following days at Heartland were filled with a strange sense of unease. Amy found herself lost in thought more often than not, caught between past and present. The wooden box Ty had given her sat untouched on her nightstand, a silent reminder of everything unresolved. Meanwhile, Lindy had been spending more time with Ty. At first, it was small interactions, watching him work in the barn, asking him about the horses. But as the days passed, she grew more comfortable around him, her curiosity outweighing her uncertainty. One afternoon, Amy found them together by Spartan's paddock. Ty was kneeling beside Lindy, pointing at the horse's hooves as he explained something. Lindy listened intently, nodding along. Amy's heart tightened. She wasn't ready for this. Not yet. Later that evening, Lou approached her. "You have to make a decision, Amy. You can't leave things in limbo forever." Amy exhaled sharply. "I know, Lou, but I don't know what the right decision is." Lou placed a gentle hand on her sister's shoulder. "You do. You just don't want to face it." That night, as Amy lay awake, she knew Lou was right. She had been avoiding the inevitable. Ty's return had shaken everything, but it was time to face it head on. The next morning, she found Ty at the barn tending to a horse. He turned when he saw her, something hopeful in his eyes. "We need to talk," Amy said firmly. Ty wiped his hands on his jeans. "Okay." Amy took a deep breath. "I've spent years trying to move on, convincing myself that I had. But having you back, it's complicated. I don't know if we can go back to what we were." Ty nodded slowly. "I don't expect us to, but I'd like the chance to build something new." Amy studied him for a long moment. "Then let's start there. Slowly." A small smile tugged at Ty's lips. "I can do slow." For the first time since his return, Amy felt the weight on her chest lighten. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but at least now they were walking it together. As the days passed, Amy and Ty worked on rediscovering their connection, this time not as the young couple they once were, but as two people who had lived through pain, change, and growth. Ty took on more responsibilities around Heartland, easing his way back into ranch life. He and Jack spent hours talking about horses, the land, and even the challenges that lay ahead. It was like old times, yet different, tinted with years of distance and heartache. Amy, on the other hand, had to deal with her own uncertainties. She knew she had changed since Ty left. She had become a stronger, more independent woman, a devoted mother, and a skilled horse trainer. Would there still be room in her life for him? One afternoon, while brushing Spartan, Amy confided in Jack. I want to trust him, but what if he leaves again? What if we try and it doesn't work? Jack sighed, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. Amy, life's about taking risks. Love is about taking risks. You've been carrying the past for too long. Maybe it's time to let it go and see where the road leads. Jack's words echoed in her mind as she watched Ty with Lindy. He was patient, kind, and willing to put in the effort to build a bond with their daughter. Lindy, in turn, was growing more attached to him, asking for bedtime stories and insisting that he help her with her pony. Then, one evening, Lindy had a nightmare. She woke up crying, calling out for her mother. Amy rushed to her room and found Ty already there, holding her gently, whispering reassurances. Seeing them together, Amy felt a lump form in her throat. This was what she had feared and longed for all at once. A family, a chance at healing. The following weekend, Amy decided to take a leap of faith. She invited Ty on a trail ride, just the two of them. As they rode through the rolling hills, memories of their past flooded her mind. Do you remember the first time we rode together out here? Amy asked, glancing at him. Ty chuckled. Yeah, you were showing off. Jumping logs, racing ahead. I was struggling to keep up. Amy smiled. I always knew you'd catch up. Please like and subscribe our channel if you like this.